My name is Richard Hudson. I'm the CEO and editor of Science Business and president of the Science Business Innovation Board, which is an awful lot to say, but I'd like to welcome you to this discussion of this Innovation Board regarding regional innovation. The board, as many of you know, does original policy research on innovation and organizes gatherings such as this to bring together companies, universities, and policymakers about innovation in Europe. We are joined, besides those of you here in the room with us, thank you for joining us. We also have an online audience watching on the web. To those of you, welcome. We will be taking questions from you online and in the room. For those of you who would like to send in questions online, very quickly, the email address is live@sciencebusiness.net. That's live, L-I-V-E, @sciencebusiness.net. Or Twitter it at hashtag InnoRegions, SB, InnoRegions, plural, SB for Science Business. Anyway, so we'll take your questions. Now, we're delighted to be joined here by Commissioner Hahn. He is the Commissioner for Regions, and as such is responsible for an extremely important part of innovation policy. That is to say, the innovation and research funding that's available through the European structural funds. There is a new policy for that has just taken effect on how that will work, and the Commissioner is here to tell us about it. We are joined, before you begin, Commissioner, we are joined here also by Tuula Tiri. She is the president of Aalto University from Finland and a member of the board. Beside her is Maya Said. She's vice president for strategy and science policy at Sanofi, the pharmaceutical company, and also a member of the board. Beside her is David Eiton, the group head of technology for BP, also a member of the board, and Joe Macri, the vice president for public sector at EMEA, at Microsoft, and also a member of the board. So thank you very much. Now, Commissioner, please, what is this new policy?
Thank you, Richard, board members, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me here in order to give you an idea about structural fund and how it works and how, from our perspective, innovation and research is seen and what are for us the critical and decisive elements. And in that respect, there are basically two main concerns we have to address. Firstly, Europe is, and I think this is a more general comment, which is valid for in general, is Europe is excellent in turning money into knowledge, but lacking in turning knowledge into money. So meaning translating knowledge into business cases, I would say, is one of the big deficiencies of Europe, and here we have to see with all our means and the policies how we can overcome the situation. But the second concern is already more related to our policy, and I don't know if you are so aware about the situation, but as we are always talking about a Eurozone and a non-Eurozone, I would say Europe is also divided into a research zone and a non-research zone. If you look at the map of Europe, you can rather easily identify the research zone and the non-research zone, and to a certain extent the Eurozone and the non-Eurozone covers more or less the same area, but maybe the research zone is even smaller. So this is something we have to address, and here structural funds came in. Because these two facts I have just sketched out have an important impact on the economic growth potential, the well-being of people, and the level, finally, of science all over Europe. On particular challenge is this brain drain, and here in particular in Eastern and Southern European countries. If you take as an example Latvia and Lithuania, they have lost 10% of their workforce in the last 10 years since their accession to the European Union. 2 million people emigrated from Romania, and one can imagine that those people are not the most unskilled ones. We see similar trends and worrisome figures in Bulgaria or the Western Balkan countries, and especially youth immigration is causing the Balkan brain drain. As an example, some figures, already 12,000 people between 25 and 35 years leave Serbia every year. 10,000 leave Bosnia, and 9,000 leave Croatia annually. So you can imagine this counts for 15 to 20% of a year's age in that member states, and these are the best ones, and it's rather likely that nearly none of them returns back, maybe for holidays, but not for work in their home country. And this is something we have to change. And I can tell you, as a former CEO and board member of an innovation-driven company, and as a former National Minister for Science, I'm convinced that these challenges can only be tackled by innovation. In this regard, it's also no coincidence that innovation and education are key targets of the Europe 2020 strategy. We can be proud of our achievements in Europe, and we can be proud of the world's largest internal market, which is without any doubt our economic engine. But to reap the full potential of the internal market, Europe needs to close its innovation divide. In this regard, a European research program or Horizon 2020 program is crucial, but may I say, not enough. Also in terms of money, if you compare, Horizon 2020 allocates 80 billion euro, which is a significant increase compared to the previous period, and may I say, right so. But regional policy will allocate at least 100 billion for innovation, research, strengthening the competitiveness of the economy. The difference is Horizon 2020 is driven by the excellence criterion, and this is also correct, and there are no doubts it has to be also in the future. Horizon 2020 does not have a geographical criterion to spread innovation. That's why it is so important to have a geographical instrument like regional policy. And here we have just finished the biggest legislative reform of regional policy since its introduction in the 70s. And this reform focuses on the stimulation of the economy. What are the main objectives of the funds? The main objective of the funds are not just to help poor regions to catch up, but to help all the 274 regions in Europe to implement European objectives like the European 2020 strategy. It's important to stress that the traditional task of regional policy was, and certainly is, also in the present and future, to help poor regions to catch up. But more and more important is to have a financial instrument at hand to improve the economic situation of Europe, its competitiveness, and also to have something, a financial instrument, to follow up the European political objectives currently laid down in the Europe 2020 growth agenda. So we have, for the moment, a clear focus on research and innovation, on SME, renewable energy production, and energy efficiency. And we have set minimum shares for these areas in the less developed, better developed, and transitional regions. But I also want to emphasize that we define innovation in the broad sense of the term according to OECD, not in the narrow technological sense. So if a company, for instance, introduces a new marketing concept, a new PR concept, which improves its competitiveness, it's also something we accept as something which is innovative and improves the competitiveness of a given company. In this regard, we especially focus on strengthening the cooperation between universities, businesses, and government like it's the case in so-called clusters in innovative regions like here in Belgium or in the Netherlands, where I have been just last week. However, experience shows that spending money alone is not automatically leading to innovation. Unfortunately, quite the opposite. That's why we want every region to adopt a smart specialization strategy, which gives a clear picture of its strengths and weaknesses. And believe me, I have visited over the past 4 years many regions, also, and if you like, especially remote ones. Each of them has its potentials as assets. It's only sometimes necessary to identify it, to see what it is. But often it's exactly the remoteness which can be turned into an advantage, if you like, a unique selling proposition. And this is what we are working on. I have to say, of course, for some regions this is nothing new, and for others it's still a particular challenge. And the guiding principle how to use the funds is projects follows strategy. This is, may I say you, I would say the biggest cultural shift for many is that we are not now talking or working on the implementation of individual projects, but all these projects have to be embedded in a strategy, be it a smart specialization strategy, be it a transport strategy, being an energy strategy, but there has to be a strategy and not only an idea and a feeling how the money could be spent. But before I end, I want to draw your attention to the fact we aim to make better use, and I think this is something which is of a particular interest from yours, about the synergies between Horizon 2020 and regional policy funds. This is not always an easy task, in particular because of the different intervention logics and different accountability constraints. But I think it's a necessary one and should be promoted by all players involved. To conclude, we know from surveys that 80% of people want to live, work and get old in the region that they have born in. And if we are capable of strengthening the innovation capacities of regions, I think we can provide a great perspective for our children and grandchildren. We have the money, we have the tools and instruments for innovation. What finally need is, I have to say, the entrepreneurial spirit and the people that implement innovative projects. Thank you for your interest, and I'm keen to take some questions or to discuss with you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Please have a seat. First, let me just take a question from online. Marilyn.
Yeah. The microphone. I've got a question from Friuli region in Italy. Are there any pitfalls that the Commission or the regions should avoid in deploying structural funds for innovation?
I mean, to avoid a pitfall, we ask them to come forward with a strategy. And it's not a bureaucratic demand from us, but it is something which helps some regions to have a much clearer picture about the opportunities, their potentials, and it's often more than a provision for the use of our funds. It's often an opportunity to have a much better idea about the future of a given region.
But Commissioner, if I can jump in to supplement that, then how is a region supposed to develop a strategy like this? Many of the regions aren't going to have the background to do it.
Yeah, we have offered and provided experts which are available. We work together with the Joint Research Center in Sevilla, and I think now around 150 regions are already member of this smart specialization platform. I mean, I'm not focused on the term itself. I think it's more important to see the content. If this content is achieved by another term, I'm flexible. But decisive is that member states, regions have a clear idea in which areas they try to concentrate their financial investments.
Questions? Questions from here? Would anyone like to? Yes, Tula.
I can maybe repeat what we a little bit already talked at the lunch, is that when you have so many different kinds of regions and different kinds of possibilities or innovative capacities of these regions, so how will you evaluate, what is a good strategy? How do you know that for Finland, the strategy is excellent or it's better or worse than Sweden's, for instance?
I have to say this is
For instance,
this is certainly something which is also a challenge for our people, because it's for the first time to negotiate and to agree on substance. But we have developed together with our member states and experts from the different areas, I would say, from my point of view, nearly a never-ending list of indicators. But of course, we have to assess all the proposals from the member states and regions individually. But in principle, we have to apply the same standards. Of course, part of our policy, of our philosophy is, as I have said, to catch up, but not only in economic terms, but also in capacity terms, in knowledge terms. And here we have to guide some more than others. We have to assist some more than others, but the demand, the requests are the same.
Okay, another?
Yeah, the thing I was going to add, when I heard the question, I thought the question the opposite way around, which is how do we ensure we're successful with that application? And in our experience, we do quite a lot of things, but in our experience, it's probably three things. One is having a critical mass of capability, expertise, whatever the core competency is, that you don't have half a person, you have a critical mass of that expertise. Secondly, that there's some notion of, I'll call it public-private partnership, but some sort of partnership between government, between industry, and between the university. Because if you get those three working well together, then you can do great things. And then finally, to make sure that there's an individual that's a mentor or a coach who's done that before or has experience in that area that can help whoever this individual is or this company is or this organization is to succeed. In our experience, if you do those three things, your probability of being more successful is higher. That's how I thought about that question.
Yeah, once again, I think we have changed significantly the policy, and this means also a cultural shift, and it's a learning process for everybody, not only for the regions and the member states, but also for us, as I said. But what we can already see is that, for instance, within the Commission, the level or the readiness to coordinate, to work together between the different DGs has significantly increased. So it's no longer this silo mentality we can often see, because if the Commission wants to negotiate with member states on substance, it's only DG Regio would not have this knowledge, this know-how, which has to be provided by the individual DGs being in charge of the different areas. And also the necessity to attract external experts is another positive outcome of this process, and the same applies for member states. So I think at the end it will be not easy. We will certainly have, like always in life, very different results, but I think it's important to start this experiment, if you like, open-minded, and for the moment I would say this is certainly the case, and I'm rather confident that in a few years already you can see the consequences of this new policy in the way that many regions, some member states, which are now facing economic difficulties, will definitely improve their performance.
Okay. Yes, David, and then Maya. And then we'll come to you.
Yeah, the Commission has ambitious energy goals, and there aren't very many sources of energy. In simple terms, it's windy or it's sunny or whatever. Do you see the use of structural funds being predominantly related to a region's natural geography and advantages, the hills or sun or wind or whatever it is? Or do you see other potential uses of structural funds to support the Union's energy and climate goals?
I mean, not only because it's written in the Lisbon Treaty, this principle of subsidiarity, but our understanding is always that member states, regions have certainly a better knowledge about the situation on the spot. What is our line or guideline is, of course, the main objectives, and then member states, regions have to respond according to their opportunities, their current situation. And of course, when it comes to renewable energy, one has to take into account geographical and topographical conditions. For instance, there is not everywhere the same strength of wind around Europe. The same applies for water, for sun, and all these things. So certainly this has to be taken into account. But one should see, I personally believe that in the area of energy efficiency, there's much more potential. And this is something we address in particular in the urban area, where there are a lot of savings possible. And here in particular, Horizon 2020 can play a decisive role to improve the situation, and this can be accompanied by the structural funds to finance one or the other pilot project, which hopefully might trigger a lot of private investments. I think this is also something which has to be understood. The fact that we have this multi-annual financial framework is something unique in the world, that such an entity like the European Union is able to agree about a 7-year budget. Basically it's 10 years, because there are additional 3 years time to complete projects. So for private investors, I think it's extremely important, and I think it's great that someone, the European Union, in its member states, is able to offer in certain areas, and the rules of games are clear, public, possibilities of investments. And this should certainly trigger a lot of additional private investments, and therefore I was so keen that we have a quick agreement and adoption of our regulations and the budget in order to avoid the private sector to come in.
Okay, thank you. Maya.
Actually, just building up on that, in terms of measurable impact, what do you see is the role, if any, of large industrial players in this context?
Well, I think they can contribute, first of all, with their research capacities, because if you look in a member state or in each country, I mean, the number of companies which are really doing research work is a very limited one. And these are usually big companies which have the financial means, and only a few of them are, for instance, active in what I would call basic research. Yes. So this is something exceptionally, and I'm grateful for each company which is willing to offer some money to basic research where clearly it's not quite clear what is the outcome.
You speak as the former science minister in Austria. Yes, okay.
That's true.
But now you have a new job now.
But I will never deny what I have done before, so this is a principle of mine. So I think big companies can contribute, and that's why I have stressed this migration issue, because I think here there is also special responsibilities of big companies, multinational companies, to take care that there is, if possible, an equal distribution of qualification around Europe, because it's the baseline for the economic perspective, for the welfare of a given region. And this is later on, again, I would say a precondition for good profits in the regions. So if big companies contribute to the improvement of a given region, it's a positive thing for themselves later on.
Thank you. Let's take a question or two from the audience. And Commissioner, I believe that you have to leave shortly, correct? Yeah, you'll let us know, okay?
Depends on the question.
But we, of course, will continue with this discussion.
Quality before speed.
Yeah.
Means leaving, yeah.
Make it a good question then. Yes, please, go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I just want to jump on the fact that you're talking about the private sector. My name is Ana Coelho. I work for the government of Catalonia and the Catalan Agency for Competitiveness. I have a question regarding supporting SMEs and their innovative capacity through the structural funds. Because still now, structural funds, according to our experience, structural funds are not very much suited to help innovation capacity of SMEs. Thank you.
Look, this has to be defined individually, and I think what you address is more this golden plating or red tape in many cases, and here one has to say, without leaving it to the member states, but the requirements from the European level are much lower than it is finally the case, but this is also due to the fact that member states and regions are accountable to us. So that's why they introduce one or the other layer, but not all of them are necessary. So this is clearly a huge interest from us to reduce this red tape by introducing, for instance, more flat rates, lump sums, whatsoever, in order to allow smaller companies also to participate in our programs, because as I said, innovation is not something only for the big ones, it's for everybody, and we have to improve the innovation capacity of all our companies in order to improve our overall performance.
Okay, I believe there's a question online. Is that correct? Yeah.
So actually, there are a lot of questions on the synergies between the structural funds and Horizon 2020. And an additional aspect is the fact that the Commission published a regional innovation indicator. And could you define in simple terms what are the criteria that make a region innovative? Is it R&D investment? Is it existing infrastructures, future projects?
There are certainly, and we can provide the audience and all the online participants with a list of indicators related to this assessment. But finally, if it comes to the assessment of the individual regions, we will certainly take parts or some of these indicators to appraise a given region and to agree about certain figures, because it's an aim of mine, and I know it's not an easy exercise, to be also in terms of the program as simple as possible and not to be too complex and too complicated. But of course there is always an attempt or a temptation to introduce too many indicators and conditions, but there's a long list, and we can provide the audience with this kind of...
Another question from the hall? Yes. Microphone on its way. Please identify yourself.
Hello. Hello. My name is Antonio Cunha. I'm rector of University of Minho in Portugal. And my question is about the link between structural funds and Horizon 2020, of course, that you highlighted as a very important point. The mechanisms that will be used to promote this coupling, do you think they have to be regional specific, or there will be a kind of a general mechanisms that will be induced by the European Commission in order to promote this link that I think is essential to achieve the goals of the next European framework?
I mean, there will be some areas where really a close cooperation and the joint use of funds might be possible. But to make a long story short, I think that at least my main objective is to offer by structural funds an opportunity to improve the attractiveness of universities, of research facilities, by offering the necessary state-of-the-art equipment, infrastructure, etc., to offer attractive salaries, so that we create, if you like, a scientific environment which might attract outstanding researchers and scientists to a university. And here we can, and this would be the baseline to be competent enough and in terms of research capacities and so on to approve, for instance, for ERC grants, etc. So what we can do is to provide the necessary surrounding in terms of hard and software in order to improve the overall performance of, for instance, a university to compete in a more global competition.
Commissioner, could I ask you a question that we've been thinking about as a board, and we're working on a study on this question. Why the whole premise of innovation in the cohesion funds? Why would we care about where an innovation comes from? I mean, if the markets for technology are global, from the point of view of the European economy, why even worry about a regional dimension if you're talking about research and innovation? And I don't know whether some of the other board members would like to jump in on that as well, but it is something we've been talking about. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think it's a conditio sine qua non, if you like, to attract a region, to keep people there and to attract other peoples to come there. So innovation is a core element of the attractiveness of a region. And in that respect, we have to try to do everything. And that's why I have mentioned this still existing division between research areas and non-research areas in Europe. And this is related to more innovative regions and less innovative regions. So if we would like to catch up, we have to catch everywhere and in any discipline. And the core element of this process is certainly to be innovative and to be attractive enough to attract innovative people.
If I may ask from the companies, do you care where the innovation comes from?
I'll jump in first. Yeah. I mean, from Microsoft's perspective, we're a global company, so we do business everywhere. And so how we invest in innovation is very much a regional and local approach. So the answer is yes, and let me try and quantify that. We have about a $10 billion R&D fund that we spend every year. About 10% of that, roughly, is what you would call, Commissioner, basic, pure research. And that happens roughly in 3 places around the world. In Seattle, of course, Beijing, and in Europe, it's in Cambridge. They have a very strong network with universities across the region, but it's very centralized. So in that context, we're very invested deeply. We then broaden that out, and that's on the long-term horizon. On the short-term horizon, the 1 to 3 year cycle, we have about 20 development centers across Europe, and they focus on product development, so the commercialization of that intellectual property in order to take it to market. But we don't stop there, because even that doesn't get the footprint that we think we need. The next thing we do is we have what's called an innovation center, where we do a public-private partnership between the university, the government, and Microsoft. That's about 100 places around the world. About 30 of those are in Europe again. And the way we measure success there is specifically job creation. And that's our measure of success. And then finally, from a global point of view, we have a programmatic approach in something called BizSpark, where we're focused just on startups, just everywhere. And we've been involved in about 50,000 startups across the world. And that's notwithstanding the 250,000 partners we have today in the region. So the short answer is yes, we absolutely care, because we want to do business globally. We are a global company, and we're not unique. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that's only Microsoft, but that's our approach to this question. And so we very much structure that approach of research through to development, through to innovation, through to employment, right across the globe.
Okay. Is it Mario? You're about to add something.
No, I was just going to compliment, so to give you a compliment.
But you do care then where it is.
I'll give you the long answer. The short answer is yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's easy to say each company needs customers, and customers have to afford to buy something, and sometimes if we are talking about advanced technologies, they have also to have the knowledge to use this, and in that respect, for a company, it should be crystal clear, and it is crystal clear, to take care about the development of a region in their own interest.
Mm-hmm. Maya. And Dave.
Yeah, so the short answer is it does make a big difference, also for the healthcare industry. So I come from an industry which is similar probably to your perspective in terms of technology, where in particular investment in basic research, I would say it's not a luxury, but a necessity for the industry itself. And we've been undergoing a major crisis in terms of innovation in healthcare. And one of the issues, in terms of innovation crisis, is how do we translate basic science to application therapeutics that have an impact on patients, and to go from pure basic science as done in universities to a potential therapeutics that we could start testing in humans. We're really missing, what we could call the translational link. And to get that research, that creativity depends on many different players in an ecosystem. So we're really talking about ecosystems and clusters, and where critical mass makes a difference. So while we're a global company, actual innovation happens in clusters, and co-localization does make a difference between hospitals, between academics, between SMEs. They're a big, important element of innovation in healthcare, and our investments. So, to tell you the model in terms of how we invest in R&D at Sanofi, we've reorganized our entire research investments around hubs. So we're located in essentially 4 major hubs: in Boston in the US, in broader North America, in France, in Germany, and in Asia. And where we're looking for regions where there's this complementarity into the ecosystem of all the major players. Because that's where really the creativity in terms of basic science to translational science occurs. Then late development to commercialization could happen on a more, I would say, distributed manner regionally, but that critical mass is essential. And where we invest depends on the underlying infrastructure. It depends on, whether you have all the elements of an ecosystem that we as an individual company, or even as an industry, pharmaceutical industry, we cannot build on our own. So we heavily rely on these kind of initiatives to create those clusters. So to give you just one example, there's many examples in Europe, but I'll take just one. If you look at the Upper Rhine region, so the Strasbourg, Freiburg, Heidelberg, that area, that's actually a great cluster when it comes to healthcare innovation. And actually, we've been very engaged in the last 2 years of establishing a public-private partnership, Franco-German partnership, because actually it's a transnational area, to really get into the universities, University of Heidelberg and University of Strasbourg, the industries, pharmaceutical industry, the SMEs, to work around specific areas where we can drive innovation from basic science to therapeutics that we could then develop and distribute essentially globally.
Okay. David, did you want to add something?
Just to add very quickly, to maybe add some numbers, for every $1 million we spend on research, we spend about 10 million on development, 100 million on demonstration. And when it comes to deployment of technologies as part of a big energy cluster, you're talking certainly billions and sometimes tens of billions for an individual development. So the further down this route you go in terms of translation, the more important it becomes. The numbers rapidly become much bigger. And so whereas I think your statement that technologies technology development is often considered a global activity. We don't mind so much where the invention comes from. We hope we make it, but we won't. Somebody else will probably make it. The more mature and advanced, the more developed the technologies, the more we care about where that happens. And 80% of growth in developed countries is coming from innovation. So that's where the massive quantum of jobs and wealth creation occurs. So yes, it matters an awful lot to us, and I imagine it matters equally to the European Commission and others who are trying to form policy. This is where the big jobs and wealth creation occur.
Commissioner, I know you have to go. Tula, before you do, just one question from you. What is your view on this? Yes, it matters to you where the money gets spent because you're in Helsinki. But honestly, come on, you're a technology university. You know the markets are global.
You know, what I was actually wondering when I was listening to this discussion that it doesn't sound like it's important that every region in Europe is equally competitive for the industries, but it is important that there are important.
It's not working.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so what I was wondering is that, it does seem to matter for the industries that there are important concentrations of innovative capacity, but it is not important that you have them all over in different places. And in my point of view, coming from a developing university, in a developed country, my question is that, excellence is expensive. And the question is, what are the different kinds of ideas of, how much excellence type of, these innovative ecosystems we can afford to have in Europe as opposed to maybe more sort of micro-level innovative, because they are so different. I mean, IKEA was not based on basic research, but it's a fantastic innovation. So if you use the same criteria for looking at the growth strategies, isn't there a risk that you're kind of diluting the excellence out of the innovation system, because it's really expensive to have a huge hub, which I think you were referring to.
First of all, I think it's important to understand that in principle we have to apply everywhere the same standards and requirements. So we cannot say, well, this is a less developed country or region, so we are less tough and the other ones are more advanced. So, but I think the biggest challenge for everybody, more than ever, due to the budgetary constraints we are facing everywhere in companies, in governments, is to make choices. Yes. So we are not talking that each region should have all the same areas of technologies and so on. And also at universities, it will be more and more important to choose some areas where you are much more advanced than maybe in the others where you meet the teaching requirements. And this is certainly for everybody, everywhere, the biggest challenge, because if you have to make choices, you have to hurt one or the other. And this is not fine for those are in the lead, because sometimes they have to be re-elected, sometimes to be reappointed or whatsoever, but it's unavoidable. We have to make choices, but choices accompanied by more cooperation and coordination, and that's what's Europe about. And we can offer this in Horizon 2020, also already the framework programs. You could only apply if you offered a project where you had participants from, I think, at least 3 member states or 2 member states. So it was already necessary, and it will be even more important and relevant in the future. So choices on the spot, but embedded into improved setting of coordination.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. Very much, we will be following the development of the new policy very closely.
Me too?
Yeah.
Wherever I am.
Thank you very much. Don't go away, because we are going to continue A little more discussion amongst us. Yes, please stay here for a moment. And then we are going to go deeper into smart specialization. We have a short film from DG Religio about this to explain their strategy a little more. And then we have some of the researchers and policy people who are really specialized and expert in this who are coming on. So please, thank you very much, Commissioner. Okay. Could if I could ask, we're doing a repair. Here, while he's doing that, because actually one of the questions that I had, pardon me? That's what he's up to. Why we'll find so, all right? Great. Okay, we're back. All right, that's fine. But I was going to begin with you, Tula, on one question. What's the role of a university in regional development?
I think that's one of the things that, sometimes, again, having spent most of my career, in a university environment and working with innovation questions, I sometimes feel that universities, in these discussions about competitiveness and innovation, everybody understands that they somehow are important, but somehow not always included in the discussion. So we are kind of like the invisible man that everybody knows about, but it's very difficult somehow. I don't know why it's so difficult to understand what is the role of universities, in the innovation system. And I really hope that, whatever the Commission is doing about this, is to sort of clarify the role of universities, as part of the innovation system.
Well, innovation can happen without universities, surely.
It can, yeah, but not research-based innovation. And also, the thing is that we have a really critical role in developing the talent, and without the people, innovation can't happen. So I think that, if you look at, what if you sort of want to crystallize the role of universities, is to say that, first we have to be good enough so that we can attract talent, so we can get the best people to educate our students. And that's how you get more talent, because we get the best, good universities get the best people, and those people will either do more research and continue with the innovation activities which are based on research, or they are going to migrate to companies. And that's how the newest knowledge is transferred into the companies. And oftentimes innovations at least need something which is new. It's very difficult to innovate, And I mean, like we have in Finland this problem that most of our innovation is actually incremental, small improvements on existing products. And this is not going to rescue our forest industries. Okay. So we need radical innovations, and these are...
David, when you're citing a lab, does it matter? What's the role of the university in that decision? Does the decision begin with...
Can I distinguish between individual research projects and large mission-oriented programs? For the latter, we will generally have a competitive process globally, and we'll pick the university that we think has the most capacity to be a hub and connect with other universities. So that will be a straight global competition. When it comes to individual research programs, we have a pretty good idea who some of the best PIs in the world are, and so we will reach out to an individual in Spain or Shanghai or Boston or wherever to do an individual research project. We try and find the best person to work with on that one. So in that case, I think I'm agreeing entirely with the sort of philosophy espoused around excellence.
But to continue with that, though, then is there, for any major technology multinational, is there any likelihood that the regions that the Commissioner was talking about, the developing regions, could be such a site? How realistic is this to be the site, the hub of a research enterprise?
Well, if you just if you don't think about this just for a second as a European question, but if you think of this as a global question, I think many of us have set up research institutions, development, translational facilities in developing countries. We've done it. I mean, China, India, etc., etc. So I don't actually see that question. I mean, it also applies equally in a European context. You will set up research facilities there where you think that there will be long-term advantage to your company and the business it wants to do. But I mean, just to pick up on one point, though, I mean, the idea of regions don't matter or what, that's not true. I mean, what we at least want is to work with successful institutions in successful regions, because that's sustainable, and we invest for the very, very long term. These are multi-decadal relationships sometimes that we create. So we do want both institutions and regions to be successful, and a big part of that is going to be their ability to innovate consistently and have that place thrive.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just add, and probably take the point a little bit tendentially. We absolutely believe that universities are necessary, but equally they're not sufficient. So they're part of the solution. And so the work that we do with universities, as I mentioned before, with our research bursaries, with our pure and applied research is absolutely critical. But it doesn't solve the broader problem of innovation, because the elephant in the room is youth unemployment, right? The number of young people in Europe unemployed is not going to be solved by the best universities in the short to medium term. So we also, in addition to focusing on the pinnacle of talent and capability of universities, we have to also focus on the broad spectrum of skills to enable innovation. And the way at least we're trying to do that as a company is via something called the Youth Spark program. And our stated objective is to train 300 million young people in the next 3 years. And we've achieved 100 million in the first year, 22 million of which are in Europe. In technology, the use of technology to get them out of long-term unemployment. So when you think about the innovation cycle and the grassroots bottom-up, that is just as important as the groundbreaking research that happens with these great universities. So it's an and, not an or.
Okay. Tula?
If I could just, come back to this question of talent, because I mean that's the thing that when we talk about the impact of universities in innovation, we always talk about research, technology transfer, IPR, things like that. But this is only half of the mission of universities, because why we do basic research is that we can provide world-class education, and you are the people who employ those people that we educate, and that is a very essential part, and that is also in a regional perspective that if you have a good talent pool in a region, the chances that there will be more entrepreneurs and more companies and more well-being is important. So I would start with education, and I would start building the basis for higher education.
Okay, all right. A question from you? Was there an online question, or was that for the commissioner?
Yeah, but it can be.
All right, okay. All right. Voila.
It was initially for the commissioner, but do you see an important role for open innovation services in regional development, and in particular for SMEs?
A role for open innovation.
For open innovation.
Ian, say that again. I couldn't hear.
For open innovation to help regional development,
okay, all right.
and in particular SMEs.
All right. Any comment?
Just with a few comments, because and you said there's going to be a video around smart specialization, and
we're looking at the opening screen of it, in case you're wondering what this is about. But go on.
Because one thing I think in the policy laid out by the commissioner that I think is going to be critical is this notion that I think any region could potentially develop, but you have to build on something, right? So you can't build totally out of scratch. You can bring in different things, and it's been done, in places where there was nothing in the world. But you have to start with some kind of thing, and it goes back to this, what's the competitive advantage of a region, and can you link it to something broader? So I think, open innovation can mean a lot of things to many people, so I kind of...
let me just try and...
But the notion of actually connecting to an open community that could transcend the region, so let me just put that slight definition into it, I think could be very important in this context, because it could allow SMEs or places that are maybe subcritical mass to actually connect to critical mass innovation that would allow those regions to flourish? Again, this is one definition of open innovation. There's many, so maybe you want to elaborate
the only
on
one
that.
I was going to add to that, if I understand the question correctly, is that there is a need and want for the sharing of open standards. And in software terms, there's the source code. And so the Microsoft Innovation Centers that I mentioned before, one of the things that we actually do is share openly the source code of certain innovations that were created in the R&D labs but not commercialized for whatever reason by Microsoft, but given out to other investors and innovators to take that code and take forward. So if that's where the question is coming from, our view is there's absolutely a role for that, and it's something that, again, not only Microsoft, but we do it, but I know other companies do it as well.
Okay, all right. Well,
I thought that music was our cue, right?
Yeah, I think that was a hint. Okay, thank you very much to the panel. As mentioned, we now see a cartoon about smart specialization. And while that's playing, can the new panel come up and take your seats and get mic'd up? Thank you.
All is not well in the kingdom of smart. We are broke, my lord, and in the south, several dominions are getting desperate. What are we to do? Place a tax on cows, sire. No, a tax cut for millers.
We should build a new cathedral.
How about closing the borders?
What
do you have to say? Speak up.
If I may be so bold, Your Grace, we urgently need an innovation strategy for smart specialization.
What are you talking about?
Well, it means that we have hungry dwarves wanting to be fed, excited goblins longing to be unleashed, and sleeping giants ready to be awakened.
Hungry dwarves?
Yes, sire. You certainly remember our dwarf craftsmen in the mountains producing quality shoes which were once so popular. But now, people buy cheap shoes and the dwarfs are struggling. Offer them a new challenge. Help them join forces with the artists, goblins, and young engineers, and they could do great things again.
Okay, but what about the goblins? They have some crazy ideas, but neither the guilds nor the bankers will risk investing in them.
Your Excellency, you could easily unleash the goblins' potential. If you back them at the beginning, others would trust them. Then they could use their knowledge and skills to develop new techniques and thus help the giants.
The famous giants. Why are they sleeping?
They fell asleep because they haven't noticed the world is changing and needs new ideas. We need to wake them up. Get them together with other creative people and help them to focus their energies on improving their methods and setting themselves apart from our competitors.
Interesting, but how do we do this?
Your Majesty, unfortunately, you cannot dictate innovation. However, you can certainly cultivate it through entrepreneurial discovery. This cannot be done from inside the palace. You have to come out and listen to what they have to tell. You can convince them to work together and use the Smartorial funds to support them in their innovation efforts. We have all written it up for you. This manuscript explains how smart specialization can work, but beware, this is not a magical solution. It needs leadership, commitment, collaboration, and future-orientated investment and faith in our future.
Good, young lady. Let's innovate together. Let's go for smart specialization.
Well, that just explained everything that this panel needs to discuss. So welcome from me to this panel of experts, which will just get seated, and our audience here, as well as the digital audience. For the next 60 minutes, we're going to have a debate about how structural funds can best promote innovation. We've started that debate, but we're going to drill down now and get a little bit more specific, which should be very interesting. We have a terrific lineup of experts, but as they get seated here, I'm just going to give a couple of highlights from a brief paper that we've been working on about some key policy points related to this new buzzword, smart specialization. And the first point is that promoting innovation in regions without it is going to be a tough job. Why? It's because smart specialization or innovation is done mainly in rich regions, and it's the natural process of industry and entrepreneurs investing in what they do best. Of course, they have money to invest. Places that are well enough off, like Munich or Stockholm, can benchmark themselves against Silicon Valley or Cambridge, and guess what? The recipe works fairly well. But low-income regions lack many of the basic foundations for an innovation system, as we heard in the previous panel, and that makes it tough. So the skills, the education, and the industrial base vary enormously from region to region, and that's why there's no one-size-fits-all strategy. What's needed is a custom-made approach, supporting innovation based on local skills and traditions, and this is indeed the smart specialization strategy. And that's where we are today. So as you heard, the Commission has now introduced this as a requirement to get funds. But the devil is in the detail. How should regions that often lack innovation capacity figure out how to innovate, figure out a strategy to innovate? Well, the answer is, as you might imagine, you start from where you are and you start building on what you have. You start by investing in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking. It will be money well spent, experts told us, even if the payback is longer in coming, and it will be a bit longer in coming in these regions. Another thing that works is bottom-up initiatives, like bridge building and matchmaking, which Tuli Thierry talked about. From universities to industry, from industry to universities, from cluster to cluster. And the good news is that doesn't cost very much. It actually can deliver enormous gains just by connecting the right people in the innovation ecosystem, who may not have been connected previously. And finally, to be successful, I think even the commissioner pointed out, this is going to be an experiment. You have to do a bit of risk-taking. You have to understand that failure is part of the process, and the important thing will be learning lessons from that failure and not sort of regretting them or not taking the lesson. But anyway, I want to stop talking myself now and turn to the experts. Let me introduce them briefly. On my left right here is Dominique Faure. Thank you for joining us from Lausanne. Dominique is professor and chair in economics and the management of innovation at EPFL, which is the Polytechnic University in Lausanne. And next to him, Michael Landeboso, greetings. You hail from the European Commission, and you are Mr. Smart Specialization Strategy. You are head of unit in the Competence Center for Smart and Sustainable Growth at DG Regio, and that's your main mission now. Next we have, tell me if I get this right, Francesc, Xavier Grau-Vidal, rector at the University Rovira e Virgili in Tarragona in southern Catalonia, and a professor of fluid mechanics. And on his left, we have Laura Calza from the University of Bologna, a professor and head of Life Science Regional Platform. Laura has firsthand experience rolling up her sleeves, supporting SMEs and innovation in the region. And finally, on the end, Erko Autio, professor and chair in technology transfer and entrepreneurship at Imperial College London Business School. So a terrific lineup, and I'd like to start by asking Dominique, who is actually the father of the Smart Specialization Strategy policy concept. Okay, it's been done for a long time, sometimes it wasn't called that, but the idea of applying this in regions was, he was one of the original thinkers on that. And Dominique, take us deeper into this brave new world. What is a robust smart specialization strategy? What should it look like? And will this approach really help regions spend commission money better than in the past?
Thanks, Gail. I mean, you made an excellent introduction, so good afternoon to everybody. I think you said very well that smart specialization as a process of, for a region or any kind of system of developing new specialties, which will generate structural changes, which will so modernize or diversify structures. This is not new at all. So history is full of strong examples of smart specialization, so this development of new specialties in a region through research, innovation, discovery, etc., and which really generate these structural changes. However, it's also unlikely to happen so spontaneously. So Commissioner Hahn spoke of market failures or a lot of obstacles. And so the idea of smart specialization strategies is just to put in place a process so that to facilitate for regions, and particularly for regions which are characterized by poor capacities and capabilities, to facilitate this development of new specialties, so as to modernize existing structures, to diversify the economy, etc., etc. And so setting up such a process in every region in Europe, so what Michel Lantabasso has managed for the last years, has been an important objective of regional EU policy, and I think it's a great thing. Why? Because in a sense, a robust smart specialization strategy involves breaks with the kind of old-fashioned style of innovation policy which was operating before. So the first break is, I think, with what we call horizontal policy, which means that for the most last decades, regions use the structural funds for innovation in helping the whole system, so improving framework conditions, taking the whole population of SMEs and trying to, introduce innovation culture in the SMEs, having a good university, etc., etc., which is good, which is fine. I like horizontal policy. The problem is that for many regions, it has been so much be successful in terms of impact on economic growth. And so the idea of smart specialization is not to, get rid of horizontal policy. We need horizontal policy, improving the whole framework condition. But on top of that is really to try to shift to what we call a vertical, more non-neutral objective, which is to target some new specialties, some new activities, to try to concentrate resources. It has been said on the former panel that local resource concentration matters a lot, so to concentrate resource assets on a few priorities which are promising in terms of what? In terms of potential spillovers, innovation, and structural changes. So activities which will, modernize one of the sleeping giants in the movie, or which will create a new industry, etc. So this is the first shift, in a sense, from horizontal to more vertical, preferential way of helping some activities vis-à-vis others, etc. And so this means that smart specialization, in a sense, it doesn't mean, narrowing down the development path of a region towards one technology monoculture, etc. It's really about generating options, helping the system to diversify by identifying promising new activities, concentrating resources, helping that so that at any time we will have these new options for diversifying the region, generate structural changes, etc., etc. And I'm finishing with that. The second break with old-fashioned policies, that when we want to implement this kind of scheme of prioritization, deciding and helping in a preferential way some activities, then we have to give right of, the old-fashioned top-down bureaucratic decision of the minister who will decide what are the priorities. This is not what we want. And actually what is very important is really to get rid of this model of the government having this kind of panoramic knowledge about everything. And so then the policy is just then to create incentives so that the companies will try to execute the plan. This is not that. The point of smart specialization, and so the break with this kind of old-fashioned bureaucratic policy, is that the discovery of the priorities, the discovery of what should be done, is fully part of the policy plan, actually. And so a smart specialization strategy is primarily about strategic interactions between the government and industry, stakeholders, the grassroots, to discover these activities, this discovery. And so there have been a lot of misunderstanding, you know, of smart specialization, you know, like in any kind of cabinet office of a government, people say, oh yeah, Germany is doing that, so let's do that. You know, let's do luxury goods, let's do aeronautics. That's not smart specialization at all. I mean, this is kind of top-down, you know, dream of any kind of bureaucrats. Smart specialization is really putting in place a process through which this entrepreneurial discovery process will be operating, and this is really in terms of making the connection between universities, entrepreneurs, suppliers, etc., to open new domains, explore new fields, and some of these fields will be prioritized, so that, you know, new activities will emerge and structural changes will be operating.
Thank you, Dominique. That was excellent. Of course, easier said than done. But we're going to get into that, how to do it exactly. First, I'd like to address a question at each one of the panelists. Response 10 words or less. What should the money be spent on to have the best impact? What should be the top priority? Dominique, you can start.
I think right now, I mean, this is about the process. This is, I think, for the first 2 years, and the commissioners say that, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, whether a region will choose this kind of priority or the other. The problem is really to put in place a process through which a region will be able to discover this specialty and to concentrate resources on that, etc. And this is quite difficult, actually, because it really creates new culture of policy making, culture of interaction with the industry, etc. So the priority for me is really to put in place this process for any region, for every region, so that at any time then the priorities will emerge actually quite spontaneously from this process.
Okay. That was more than 10 words, but I'm not counting.
Ah, sorry. Mais j'ai pas compris. Hein.
Okay, Mikhail.
Institutional building.
Okay.
And public-private collaborative leadership. And that is 6 words.
Perfect.
I'm taking Dominique's.
Okay. Frances.
Just a few words. There are, given the diversity of regions and the diversity of realities, probably we should say that it depends on the region. But the idea given by the commissioner was we are good in in transferring money to knowledge and less good in transferring knowledge to money.
So
then
maybe
we should emphasize in this part.
Okay.
And then to build the culture of innovation regionally.
Okay. Laura?
Well, I think that to have a shared governance of the process in which universities, of course, industrial representative, regional government, and regulatory authority, when necessary, sit together. So it's the place where the top-down and bottom-up approach should meet.
Okay, good. Erkko?
Facilitate regional systems of entrepreneurship. 4 words. I can explain what I mean.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to come back to you now because, you know, what is the difference actually? We've talked about clusters that innovate and how you promote clusters that innovate. What's the difference between that, which has been a big focus of policy over the past 10 years? Everyone in the world wants innovative clusters. What's the difference between that and a smart specialization strategy?
That's a question for me. Well, I must confess that I haven't gotten my head fully around this notion of smart specialization. I know what's meant by it. But what I haven't been able to fully visualize is that, you know, it's not supposed to be a top-down process. So regions are not, you know, governments are poor at picking winners and all that. So, you know, you shouldn't have governments selecting their strengths. So there's this process of entrepreneurial discovery, but what does that then mean? And, you know, it's a difficult question. And I'm not sure if we fully know that. And just to give you an example, people have actually academics have tried to get their head around this notion, and I saw one paper where the recommended solution was that because you cannot pick the winners, therefore you should invest randomly. So you should randomize your activity. And clearly this is not what it can be about. So this notion of entrepreneurial discovery is really something that requires further illumination.
Yeah, in fact, clusters that innovate must do this. They must have their own process of coming up with what they're good at or what they could be good at. But as you say, perhaps we need a little bit clearer definition on that. I don't know, Mikael, do you want to take that up?
Maybe to clarify a number of issues here. First, the difference between clusters and the concept of smart specialization. Clusters is a building block of this process. Because it has the ingredients of the triple helix inbuilt, but it has some elements that are lacking. Because an ecosystem for innovation, an efficient ecosystem, which is the end result of all this smart specialization process, is not only dependent on clusters. Clusters is a bit narrow a concept to encapsulate, let's say, the complexity of the interactions that are necessary in an ecosystem to promote innovation efficiently. And we have had this discussion, notably with the Porter's people, Michael Porter's people, Christian Kittels, who is the leading expert here in Europe, in Stockholm, on this. And Christian is one of the supporters of the concept because he realized of the shortcomings of the previous clusters policies, okay? Clusters was the acceptable way of doing industrial policy without running into trouble. But it was still short of what was needed in order to promote innovation, in particular in less favored regions, in my view.
Of course, clusters, there have been very successful ones. But even Christian Kittels would say that this smart specialization approach is an experiment. And it will take some learning, some failures, some, thinking about how to do it best. It might need to evolve. And the key also for him, as for many of the people we've talked to, is what is the process of entrepreneurial discovery? How do you go about doing that if you're sitting there with a grant application in front of you?
Okay, well, thank you for the easy question. The king says you cannot dictate innovation, but you can cultivate innovation. And this means that you have to come out of the palace. This is not about picking winners, but it's not to randomly distribute the money. It's about a top-down and a bottom-up process that combines. It's about taking risks. It's messy, it's dangerous, it's new. And no one has a recipe. And this is the beauty of it. Because when you face politicians, they get confused because they are accustomed to certainty. Either because the Ministry of Public Works is saying, well, we know what a road is, we know what a physical infrastructure, brick and mortar means, costs, and can be built. This is messy, this is different. When I meet with a governor in Poland 2 months ago, he says, I don't sleep with this thing about the smart specialization. Great, this is one of the objectives, that you don't sleep. Because you cannot do it by yourself in your office. You should come out of the palace and meet with the businessmen that are in this room. Because each one of them has a lot more knowledge about the markets and the potentials of the companies in your region and what is required internationally to survive than your civil servants. And you make them break these territories for planning that come from the past, the inertia from the past of bad planning. And we are opening minds rather than opening roads. And this is the bottom line of a smart specialization.
So I imagine Laura and Francesca come from regions that have some base to build on. They kind of know what they're good at. But in the case that it's a region with very little innovation or entrepreneurial skills, I mean, where do they start? Do you need a boot camp to train some people in innovation processes and strategies?
Let me change your question and say, is there any place in Europe, not an artificial region, when we talk about region, it is the place-based approach, the territorial approach, the geography of the economy, that cannot increase their developmental potential by injecting innovation and knowledge? And the answer is no. So if in every place you can progress through innovation, what is the best way and what is the role of the public sector in promoting innovation? If I go to Epirus, the poorest of the EU 2015, and you see that in tourism, there is a huge job to be done. If you go to Timisoara in Romania and you see the innovation fair and the talent that was there, while the politicians and others were thinking about roads, instead of exploiting this talent, left on the sides because it's messy and difficult and not easy to plan ahead, then you realize that the potential of the policy that we are promoting is a necessity for Europe to progress. There is no region, I would claim, here that cannot progress through innovation, and therefore this policy, this type of approach is valid to all of them.
Okay, let's move to Laura in the Bologna region. Can you give us some examples of what you've been doing on the ground and what you think works in terms of building innovation capacity in a region that is nonetheless getting structural funds?
Yeah, I'm very glad to illustrate you briefly what we have done with the structural funds since 2007. In our region, we had used a quite consistent part of this money to build up the so-called high technology network of laboratories, which is organized in 6 thematic platforms. Of course, this platform has been chosen according to the economic reality of the territory. And in this net...
And who chose the platforms?
Well, this has been at the beginning a spontaneous process coming out from university and research institution. This was just a start. After that, again, in this shared governance inside the platform, we decided together with the officials and with the university, with the industrial representative, etc., how to govern the process through 3 different steps. Now, according to this, we have already prepared our smart specialization document. Just to give you another example of this, we prepare inside the net the draft of this document. Mm-hmm. Then this has been, I think that we can say, posted in the web mm-hmm. to an open consultation process. And after that, the document has been modified according to this. I want also to say that the high technology network of laboratory is an open structure. This means that through an accreditation process, new labs can join the net. And of course, we have also quality system to check the vitality of the different laboratories. I want to add one last point at the moment. The support to SMEs is through innovation, in the sense that they have to present projects to receive support. And of course, they can use the high technology network to develop, together with the university and research institution, this project. And this is very much evaluated in the evaluation process. Finally, the evaluation process is always peer review based. Mm-hmm. So this is going to increase the competitiveness of the system.
So it's not a mission impossible to...
No, if we have done in Italy, it's not impossible. Of course, as you know, we have Italy is a puzzle in terms of regional entities. And
you have strong regions.
Yes.
Strong opinions.
We are quite strong.
But would you call it messy? Or is it not so messy to have this open, collaborative process?
Because it's quite... It's possible to govern. We know each other, basically. And the university, again, has a strong part in this process. And even the university changed a lot inside the classical academic structure. We created, for example, Interdepartmental Center for Industrial Research. That is the structure that joined the net, not a general department. So the commitment is quite strong.
This is really interesting. It speaks to what Tulu was saying about the role of the university in driving innovation, particularly in regions that are less advanced or needing to come up a couple notches.
We are thinking to education because this is really a critical point. We are thinking to have specific PhD programs and to have new position like technicians. But for this we have a national regulation that is a little bit.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience at this point? Yes, in the purple here. Microphone is coming. And just introduce yourself, thank you.
Good afternoon, Aaliyah Fairchild from University of Leuven's campus here in Brussels. We have the same challenge, and what we're trying to do in terms of cross-disciplinary teaching entrepreneurship across all the disciplines. So not only having PhD students assisted by business students, but also teaching entrepreneurship across all disciplines, trying to get people more in terms of valorization and commercialization. It was just a comment.
Okay, very good. And I think we had one more question here. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alessandro Rosiello from the University of Edinburgh. I've got a question for Professor Calza. Do you think what you did would be actually possible in other, maybe less advanced Italian regions? Thinking about also the question that you were asking before, can regions survive without innovation? Could that kind of process be possible in other kind of regions in Italy, say less advanced regions of Italy?
Or where do you start if it's at a different stage,
I go immediately to this question. The answer is yes. For example, also in the national research plan that has been just launched to join Horizon 2020 activity, we have in that case a cluster organization that can bring together different regions. This is a goal in this kind of project. These are industrial leaded projects. So we have in this kind of project like a puzzle of different Italian situations. So there is the attempt, and according to my experience, many universities in Italy are just waiting the good opportunity to do this. So I'm very positive, and I think that for sure it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
The cross-fertilization, that is also a critical point. I am the head of Life Science and Technology Interdepartment Center of Industrial Research. I am MD, medical doctor, and the vice director is engineer, just to give you an example. When we establish our priority, thematic priority to set the smart specialization document, we had this vertical activity, and of course we crossed this with horizontal themes, also including key enabling technology. So this is also a critical point that we are dealing with.
Okay. Did you want to say something to that? Or
yeah, maybe, yes.
Okay.
On Southern Italy, I just want to share with you an anecdote. I'm sorry if someone has heard it. Again, I have a few and I repeat them. After many years of the same government in the southern Italian region, the government changed, and we used this opening to establish a new management committee that will run the regional innovation strategy. It was the 90s. And we say this management committee has to reflect the entrepreneurial process of discovery. At the time, we called it the triple helix, and therefore, please, the chairman of the committee should be a businessman, not the national or the regional minister. And this person came with his committee to Brussels. He came from Calabria, and he said, I run a business that's fruit juice, and I was looking for a technologist to help me preserve the fruit juice longer, to hit other markets, more value added. And he said, I'm going to tell you a story. I went to Rome to find this person. And from Rome, they sent me to London. And from London, I ended up in California. And in California, they told me, oh, yes, of course. The leading professor here comes from Calabria University. He was his neighbor. You're talking about interactions, an ecosystem.
Bridge building.
This is it. You good examples of good tries now, Puglia.
Excellent.
They are trying.
Okay. And sorry, Francesca, finally, I think you also have some very interesting examples on the ground. What's going on between your university and some of the local industry to drive a bit of an innovation dynamic?
Yes. Yes, in fact, we follow, without knowing it, we follow a path similar to that of Bologna, with different results at the end. But I come back to the idea of the gap that exists between the research capacity and the innovation capacity, because in our region, that's even wider than on the European mean, and it has driven our policy to save that gap. In our experience began some 10 years ago. In fact, in 2001, when the university did its strategic plan for research. In that moment, we identified priority areas for research in our university, which is a comprehensive university. And those priority areas, which is natural, were related to specific economic activities of our region. I must say that Universitat Rovira i Virgili is the University of Southern Catalonia. Southern Catalonia is a region of 800 million people and has some given strength, especially in chemistry. There is a big petrochemical site, in energy. In combination with this, also in tourism, sand and beach and natural tourism, heritage. This Tarraco is a Roman city that is a World Heritage site, for instance. And another field of specialty is winemaking, enology. And we identified those fields as a strategic field for the research of the university, and then following this, we built, to save the gap and to strengthen the relationship with the sectors, we built specific technological centers. Each of them has its own dimension that are, in fact, driven by the companies or by the association of companies or whatever, the association of enterprises on each field, in such a way that right now there is a center in Vilaseca for tourism that is strongly related with the sector. There is one in, if you know, winemaking region, there is one well known in Spain called Priorat. There is one in Falset, the capital of Priorato.
And these were built with structural funds?
And those will build partially with the structural funds. We use the structural funds to build those facilities, matching funds from other sources. And right now they are running. And they are running with the interest of those sectors, which are specifically strength in the southern Catalonia area.
Is there a particular result that's interesting that's grown out of the collaboration?
There are particular results that you can follow each of them. For instance, in Turin, the relationship with, I don't know if you are aware of Portaventura. Portaventura is a site there that has the design of processes or new products are helped by this technological center. If you go to winemaking, there are examples of working with new ways of doing wine without sulfites or something like this. Or if you go to chemistry or energy, together with big companies like Dow Chemical, there are technological centers on membranes. I think there are some point examples of what arises from this policy.
Okay, I think we have another question from the audience or from our digital audience. Hold on just a minute. Go ahead, Marilyn.
So we have a question from Portugal. What is the key to attract multinationals to invest in a cluster? Second, to help startups grow and create jobs around universities.
Okay, we can split that, or whoever wants to can jump in. Attracting multinationals. You want to?
Well, just that the origin of smart specialization, ID, this was in the Knowledge for Growth group of experts a couple of years ago. The topic we were discussing were precisely how to attract multinational R&D investments in, regions. And the idea was, okay, this region should not try to imitate, emulate Silicon Valley. I mean, because the multinational will go to Silicon Valley, not to these regions. And so the idea is really to think of what could make the regional knowledge base distinctive, original. And this is based on what this region is doing with this kind of concentration of resources, etc. So in a sense, the key is smart specialization, because we really started to think of this idea and this process because of this problem.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe the issue here in Brussels, in Europe now, is not so much to attract multinationals, but to root multinationals. Because multinationals, when it refers to branch plants, they go east and further east, and they don't stop going east. So instead of having in every single European regional development agency, as it was in the 80s and the 90s, persons saying, come to my region because I have the low taxes and the low salaries, and we will build a road for you and give you almost for free the land, and come and stay here. Instead of that, what we want is people saying, come with your brain and your family too. Because in my region, I have the policies, the smart specialization policies, that will provide you the environment to exploit to its full your potential, your talent, and with a high quality of living. And then the multinationals will come after the talent.
It's, of course, a building process, not so evident at the beginning of the food chain. I want to come back to entrepreneurship because I don't think we've addressed that enough. In our study, it was clearly one of the most important things to support with structural funds. The way to do that maybe is not absolutely clear, the best way, but Erko, that's your field. Do you have some thoughts on how to best support entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial mindset?
Thank you. I think that's a very good and very important question, because that comes back to this notion that we have this smart specialization strategy, which, by the way, I'm very supportive of. But then we have this notion of entrepreneurial discovery, which is a little bit hazier. And why do we have this tension? Well, if you look at the literature on innovation and entrepreneurship are not the same thing. They are different, they are parallel, but they are different. If you look at the literature on national systems of innovation, and I actually looked at it, and I went and tried to find the word entrepreneurship in many of those foundational writings of this body of literature that has informed innovation policy and also is strongly present in the smart specialization notion, you will be hard-pressed to find that word. So it's all about innovation. And innovation, national system of innovation literature, tends to be all about structure. So the idea is that you need to get the structure in place, and then innovation will happen. And the way I understand this notion of entrepreneurial discovery is recognizing that you also need agencies. You also need to get the people to do something. Well, that's something that we know very little about, and creating regional entrepreneurial ecosystems is really difficult and can take a long time. I have been fortunate to follow the Aalto University for nearly 30 years. And it has taken that long to get that dynamic going. Mm-hmm. We have a regional innovation indicator, but we don't as yet have indicators of regional entrepreneurial dynamic, the quality of the regional entrepreneurial dynamic. So I would just basically call people to pay attention to that aspect. Do not forget the activity and entrepreneurship And I would also like to mention that the actually DG Regio is going to launch a regional entrepreneurship and development index, I believe in this month. I don't know if you have decided yet. But pay attention to entrepreneurship is all I say. Identify the strengths and weaknesses, not only in terms of innovation, but in terms of actual entrepreneurial activity. And that is a complex dynamic between attitudes, aspirations, you need aspiration, and actual activity. If you don't have that activity, you can invest all you like in knowledge production, but nothing really will happen.
Do you have any advice on how to stimulate that kind of change where it's not present?
Well, first of all, you need to understand that there too, you are really talking about the system and you are talking about the complex dynamic. You are really talking about the entrepreneurial dynamic. Who starts new firms? Why do they start those firms? And what do they seek to do after they have started those businesses? So you just need to look at the ecosystem as a whole, and you need to develop specialized resources regionally that can support that dynamic. But getting those resources in place can take time.
It reminds me of an example that I came across during my study of a paper and pulp region in Sweden that was hitting very hard times in the late 90s. The industry was leaving, jobs were disappearing, and the local region was desperate. And fast forward 10 to 12 years, and they've got a bubbling new little cluster of green industry. And how did it happen? Well, to make a long story short, the cluster manager I talked to said nothing would have happened without entrepreneurial thinking and people, and that was not present in the beginning. So that was the basic building block which they had to create, and it took investing in education, it took various programs to wake people up to the possibility that they could create a company, and then some funding to help create the companies, but there's no magic formula. It's a tough one.
You need hardware, which is innovation structures, and you need software, which is entrepreneurial attitudes, and all regions will have their own mix.
Exactly. Okay, do we have any other questions? Well, first, Marilyn, did we answer that question? There was entrepreneurship, multinationals, and what was the third one?
It was how to create jobs around universities, so that being connected to multinational investing in the cluster, and how to help startups grow.
Mm-hmm. Laura, do you want to address it?
Something about the startups, because in the frame of our network, we have a consortium that is ASTER, and this consortium is among the Emilia-Romagna regional government, the 6 universities, the other research institution, the regional union of chambers of commerce, and the regional entrepreneurial associations. And one of the aim of this consortium is to support startup. In our university, we also have an incubator that was the first example of company created, 50% university and industrial association. So ASTER is also taking care to education of young people starting these startups. And of course, we have to see not the number of startups we are created, but how many survive. And I have just few data, 3 years, we have 25% of dead, but 75% of survival is not so bad, I
Bravo.
think.
That's a better ratio than in Silicon Valley, but I think there are more tries in Silicon Valley. Okay, do we have any other questions from this audience or the digital audience? If not, I have a question about universities. One of the experts I spoke to said that universities in low-income regions often have an administrative culture and rules that are almost diametrically opposed to innovation. So I don't know if anyone on the panel from the university side has some experience with this, but what can be done to start changing the mindset of universities, which are a key component of the innovation dynamic?
I can accept that there are universities of many kinds. The diversity is very, very high, but also there are universities that they have their own strategy and on research and on innovation, on promote entrepreneurship. So I cannot, I'm not identified as this kind of university that you describe, but I can accept that they exist. What it means that universities can choose their own way. And these programs, the program of Smart Specialization Strategy, put the university on the center. So forces the university to participate, to change, and to promote the idea.
Are you running into this issue at all, Miko?
Yeah, we have a love-hate relationship with universities because we think that they are absolutely necessary. And as rightly put by the previous speaker, is not sufficient. I'm going to do a publicity stunt. We have published a guide on how universities can contribute to regional growth by some of the best experts in Europe that also work with the OECD on this. And we are running a conference on this, Universities and Smart Specialization, the 20th of June. You are all invited. And to respond to your question very shortly, we believe that university professors are normal human beings. So they, and so they react to systems of incentives. Get the incentives right.
Yeah, that I completely agree. And the boundary conditions determine the evolution of the system, and that's what this program is very, very good at this point.
There's another issue that came up in our research, which is the importance in an area that's lower income, less developed, of just getting the existing industry moving up the value chain. I think this was Christian Kettles. How do you do that? What's the first step? What's the second step? Are there any recipes out there? Sure, Laura.
Well, I can try again with an example. As you probably know, we have in the Emilia-Romagna an area which is highly specialized in biomedical devices. Is the area which was divested by the headquarters. And that area started because pharmacy that created some new devices 50 years ago. And this man started to build up one small company, another one with very innovative products. These products were absolutely excellent. So during the time, multinational company bought these products. And of course, according to this, the innovation moved out. Now we are trying to revitalize this area by introducing innovation, and we are discussing with this big, but in particular small, medium company inside this area, how we can bridge, overlap innovation that are going on in our lab on their products. Just to give a practical example in a very important and strategic area in Italy.
Excellent. Yes, Erko.
What we have learned over the years, and this is not necessarily a good answer, direct answer to your question of moving up the value chain, but just talking about innovation. So we used to teach entrepreneurship as product or service innovation. And it has taken us a fairly long time to realize that perhaps in many regions, perhaps the most important form of innovation is not technology-driven, it's business model innovation, which means being smarter about the way you do things. You can do the same things, but you can be smart about how you do things. So that's a very important issue again to remember. You know, you can have a smart business concept, and that can make all the difference in the world. And there are lots of examples about this. So innovation doesn't need to be only technology. It can
Yes,
be.
that's an excellent point and a great starting point for regions that don't have a lot of resources. Dominique.
Two things. First, this is back to the entrepreneurship discussion. I think we should not confuse entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial discovery, which means that entrepreneurship is a very important channel for entrepreneurial discovery, but the large integrated company, I mean, we had a lot of people here, is also a locus for entrepreneurial discovery, because the problem is integrating knowledge, connecting people, and so opening a new domain. And so, I mean, there are many channels, actually, not only entrepreneurship. So that's an important point. And now about the less advanced region, I think a very important point, how to use smart specialization is to think not in terms of sectoral priority. Because if you think at that level, there is no way for a less advanced region to say, okay, I will become world leader, I don't know, in medical technology or aeronautics, etc. So the policymakers and the region have to think at what we call mid-grain level, so not the sectoral level, because at that level of mid-grain granularity, here you see the pieces of the knowledge economy that any kind of region can take to really become leader in some activities. So, for example, developing biotech application for fisheries or developing ICT application for tourism, etc. Which means, again, don't formulate your priority at the sectoral level, but at this a little bit finer level, actually. Okay. And here you see what you can do.
Excellent. We need to wrap up soon. Are there any other questions for the panel from the audience or from online? Yes, Richard.
Sorry, I just have a political question here, all right? Yeah, okay. Smart specialization requires that the government decide it's going to concentrate on a certain field. Say Galicia, will concentrate on marine research, okay, whatever it is. The logical converse of that is it's not going to spend as much on something else. That means the local politician has to say no to somebody. Local politicians often aren't that good at that. So how in fact, how will you end up avoiding just, well, it's basically the same thing? How do you deal with this political reality locally?
Yeah, I have two words, and Mikel will certainly say something. This was the movie. Inclusiveness, which means that what we want is not a smart specialization strategy which is focusing on high-tech or something, but each sector, has a chance to have a good project. And this was the Sleeping Giant, the Exciting Goblins, and others. And so the beauty of the concept is that you have to concentrate resources, but any sector has a chance, in a sense, to be in the smart specialization strategy, because a good project through entrepreneurial discovery can happen. And so you need to have a couple of priorities. And in many cases, I think this is not the high-tech cluster which needs smart specialization, but precisely the Sleeping Giant, the agro-food, or the fishery. And my second answer is it is a living document. After 5 or 6 years, you have to revise your options, your priorities, etc. Which means that, the choice of today, then the politician have to say, okay, you are not chosen today, but if work well, etc., maybe at the next round you will choose them. So it's an evolutionary process. This is a generation of options all the times.
Mikael, do you have a follow-up?
This is a very difficult question, because this is where it really goes one way or the other. Some politicians, they go the easy way. They say they blame the Commission, and we are here for that too. So that's fine. The second thing is you need to make choices. As any businessman would understand for their companies, you make choices every day. You need to make tough choices, because the resources are limited, because there is a crisis out there, because you have responsibilities. And you need, in those choices, to avoid fragmentation and duplication of effort within the European dimension. Not everybody can do a biotech center, and everybody was asking for biotech centers or nanotech centers. We can't. And then, so what is the way forward for a politician to be reassured, to be solid, vis-a-vis the camera, when he has to explain, well, I chose this? Well, actually, those that are brave enough to engage in the entrepreneurial process of discovery by asking the people that know, the academia, the businessmen, And after lots of discussion and difficult ones, they come to a conclusion. They feel supported by the knowledge, by the people that were truly involved in the process. And therefore, they can face the camera then, at that stage. If you haven't done your homework, then you're weak. Your choice is not that sound, and you will be questioned.
Okay, does anyone have a final comment that you'd like to make? Yes, Francesca.
Arise a point that I think it was flying on the previous panel, was very, very interesting. It's about, and it's flying right now, it's about the dimension. On the whole picture, the commissioner said that there are 274 regions in Europe. The diversity is such a diversity that you can find regions that are much bigger than countries, and together with very, very small regions. The recipe cannot be the same. And I think we should consider, or the project should consider, both extremes. You cannot ask a region that is very diverse and large, like Lombardy, for instance, in Italy, the same thing that you are asking to other regions that merely they can have a research infrastructure. So, to me, it should be clear in somehow that you need some critical mass, was said, but minimum dimensions for something. Centered in innovation driven by research, for instance, I think that our region should have a research university. If not, then they should not have the dimension enough to make the things happen.
Sure, the role of the university, entrepreneurs, and industry will be different from region to region. Some will
and then for bigger regions, probably the policy should allow for sub-regional models.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good point. Was there, yeah, Erko, one last.
Yes, going back to Richard's question, which I think is a very important question. Under smart specialization, once the regions get the funds, they have much more autonomy to decide how to use it. And this is where this regional politician question becomes important, because it is very difficult to say no. Sure. So what I would call for, and I know it's easier said than done, but disciplined experimentation. So, experiment with different policy approaches, but be disciplined about it, so that, at some point there comes a point where you should stop throwing good money after bad money.
Sure.
And try to manage that process. Not easy, I know.
Okay, good to hear discipline from the Finns. Since I'm Finnish, I can say that. I think it's time to wrap up now, and I heard a lot of interesting points. I've been spending the past weeks reading and talking to people about this topic, and I really learned something today. I have some interesting new leads to pursue for that paper, which will be presented on March 11th at the Innovation Convention. Join us there. We'll have some interesting case studies to talk more about. And I want to thank our panelists and our audience. I would like to leave you with a little literary illusion. As I was working on this topic, a line from Tolstoy's novel Anna Karenina kept jumping into my head. The opening line of his novel is, "Happy families are all alike, and every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." And you know what's coming. Rich regions are all alike. They innovate in a similar fashion. And low-income regions are not alike and don't have the same approach to innovating. So I hope that the discussion and that the new policy is a prelude to creating a lot of happy regions that innovate in a similar way. Thank you.